afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this press conference by the Prosecutor of International Criminal Court, following up the opening of the trial of Mr. Abd-Al-Rahman. And today, we are also joined by the media in Sudan and other reporters online. On my left is the senior trial lawyer, Julian Nicholas, and our ICC Prosecutor, Mr. Karim Khan, QC, and our senior cooperation advisor, Dahiru. And just a few reminder, please, just to observe that this press conference is especially for the opening of this trial. And let's try really to focus on that and give our witness the chance that they've been waiting for far too long. They deserve that 30 minutes. So if we can refrain from asking questions from other situations, please. And with that, I welcome the prosecutor. Please, the floor is yours.
Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for making the time out of your heavy schedules to come to this press conference. I don't know if any of you were here during the opening. Of course, it's not finished. It will finish, God willing, tomorrow. The first witness will be called tomorrow. The senior lawyer with conduct of the case is to my right, as Francesca mentioned, Mr. Julian Nichols. It's a critically important moment. There's been very bleak moments when it seemed that there was no hope for justice at all for the people of Darfur. Obfuscation, non-cooperation, hostility, invective was the order of the day. And I think it took 17 years, but finally to have the first trial start before independent judges of the ICC is a singular moment, and it actually matters. It matters to Darfuris because they do crave, they do yearn for accountability and justice. Their lives mattered as much as lives anywhere else in the world. Their families, their bonds of love are as strong as anywhere else in the world, and their trauma that they have encountered and that they have suffered for so long is the same trauma that victims of international crime suffer anywhere else in the world. And I think this is an important start to vindicate the decision of the Security Council to refer the matter to the ICC. I think it's a very strong case. I think the opening today gave those that objectively reviewed it a sample. It's not hot air. It's not open source evidence from questionable sources. It's hard, solid evidence from people that saw and heard, matters and utterances and conduct that is directly germane to the charges. And then the judges, of course, will assess whether or not we've got it right, whether or not the evidence is as strong as I say, after it's been very properly tested by the defense. So I think it's an important moment for the rule of law. I think at that point, I will really leave it open to questions, because the matter is now sub judice. It's the beginning of a process. And we have to make sure also, I think the message should be, I think from me and others, it's the start. I'm quite keen, in all honesty. If I had the opportunity to close the Sudan situation, I would. But we can't close it like this, with a mirage, without real, solid, meaningful accountability. And Ali Kushayb is an important start, but it needs to be more meaningful, because when you have a situation where millions of people have been dislocated and thousands whose lives have been torn up, when you've got sexual and gender-based crimes, when you've got children who are absolutely innocent that have suffered in the way that children in Sudan have suffered in the past, and they've grown up with that tear, that scar on their soul, I think justice has to be more potent than it is. And I think what today shows is that with persistence, notwithstanding difficulties, with the stamina, walking together with victims and survivors, as long as they are willing to be strong and they're willing to be persistent, we owe them no less. Not to flag, not to lag behind, but to walk with them until the destination of justice is finally received. So I think with that, I will ask Julian, do you have anything to add?
No, thank you, Mr. Prosecutor. Just that we're very happy to have started the trial today. It's been a long time coming, as you say.
So, over to all of you.
If you don't mind, we'll go first with the question from the from the Sudan journalists. Thank you. So, Mr. Prosecutor, I'm going to read the first question from the journalists. Okay. Was the OTP able to interview a sufficient number of victims of Ali Kushaib's crime, and how many witnesses did the prosecutor listen to? That was question number one. I can read question number two. Is there any hope that the rest of the wanted persons will be handed over to the court? What is the next step by the OTP in this regard? Thank you.
Okay, well, I'll thank you for that. Who's that from? Do you want to give the radio or the TV or the station? Is it there? Okay, well, if you've got that information, otherwise I'll move on. How many witnesses? I think in the Sudan situation, and senior trial lawyer Julie Nichols will give specifics, but I'm aware that for the Sudan situation as a whole, hundreds of witnesses have been interviewed. For this particular trial, I think the witnesses, what, 120 you have on the list?
124.
Yeah, 124 witnesses on the list. Of course, they're subject to judicial control, which is quite normal. In terms of hopes, I think it's public knowledge in terms of the situation in Sudan. There's various warrants out that have been issued by the court. These have the quality of, they're judicial orders. And both the Rome Statute and also the Security Council Resolution 1593 of the 31st of March 2005 requires Sudan to cooperate, and also other states also that are state parties to cooperate. And what we want is effective justice, and that requires cooperation, it requires dialogue, it requires a joint solidarity to put the rights of individuals and very often the marginalized or the weak or those that are dispossessed or those that are victimized first, or at least not relegate them to the end of the queue, and to make sure their rights are realized in terms of accountability. So the next steps are really to keep trying to build trust with a number of partners so that hope, that prayer of the victims can be realized. And that means, of course, in Sudan, to make sure that cooperation, can improve, can be strengthened, can become more meaningful, but also many other partners in different parts of the world, whether it's states, whether it's international organizations, civil society. I've said repeatedly, and you'll get bored of me saying it during my tenure, this is an area, this is a body of law. It's a body of humanity that nobody can be a bystander. Everybody needs to be united and galvanized and work as if, God forbid, it is their mother or father or brother or sister or husband or wife or child. And if that collective imperative can permeate our souls and can motivate our minds and our hearts and our sinews, I think we can move forward, but not if we're just watching it on television as if it's nothing to do with us. This is something to do with everybody, and I think what we see around the world when we don't protect the law, and when we don't think that this is something close and personal, things don't get better, they get worse. And I think our job, and one of my jobs, is also try to build that cooperation, and it takes two to tango. And we're trying to move forward with multiple partners so that hope that the victims have can be realized. Julian, anything else in terms of the numbers?
No, I think We've got 124 witnesses in this case at this time. We've interviewed many, many more, and those are the figures we have at the moment.
Sorry, can I just ask, Fran, I mean, just for the format, always, I know everyone's known here, but just for our notes, the name and the media house so that it can all be put down. Sorry, I know you're very well known, so
Well, there were very few experts in this case. The first witness tomorrow is an expert. There may be a couple more, but the vast majority of these witnesses are persons with personal knowledge of one sort or another. I'll leave it at that. Well, all cases,
Microphone in front of you.
yeah, sorry. All cases in this type of law we do, in every case I've done, working in this field since 2000, you have insiders, crime-based, and others. I wouldn't want to give the exact breakdown, but we have both in this case. Many firsthand witnesses, as you would have heard in the opening this morning. We do as well have insider witnesses, of course, and our main duty, one of the most important things to us always is keeping everybody safe, and that's what we're doing our best to do and trying to do, and we're moving ahead.
In this witness, how many are from Sudan? And will you get enough cooperation to bring them in The Hague?
I really don't want to give that breakdown of exactly where our witnesses are and where they're from and how many from which different place.
But it doesn't say anything about the idea.
Well, anyway, I don't want to give that exact breakdown or number. And so what was the second part of your question?
Well, will you get enough cooperation from Sudan authorities?
We are expecting.
To bring them in
We are planning on bringing all the witnesses we need to this trial, and of course, and working towards that.
Mike Court from AP again. I'm just wondering, Mr. Khan, when you took office, you talked about taking cases to the people. Has there been any discussion about maybe holding some trial hearings in Sudan, in Darfur itself?
I've had discussions regarding generally what I've said, that my view is that, of course, the court is a court of last resort and The Hague should be a city of last resort, and all things being equal, justice is best served, in my view, closer to the people. And then if it can't be closer to the people, it should be, in the region and then, in the court. In terms of this particular situation, there's been no formal application by the prosecution. Tell me if I'm wrong, please, Julian, to the judges under Article 2 of the Rome Statute to sit away from the seat of the court for a number of reasons, because every case is different, and of course it's been quite a dynamic situation in Sudan. In terms of a number of obvious factors and security, and as Julian mentioned, it's not only logistics, it's witness security and all the rest of it. So it's something that we should always be open to if things change in situations, and but at the moment the trial will take place here unless the judges decide otherwise.
Thank you. Mr. Khan, Jan Hino from Agence France Presse. Obviously, it's an historic day today, the first person to go on trial for crimes committed in Darfur. The question is, obviously, the eyes are now on the other suspects in this case, which leads to an obvious question. When and how would it be possible to bring Omar al-Bashir to the court for trial? And how good is the cooperation with the Sudanese authorities? I think you said in January at the UN Security Council that it took a step back because of the overthrow of the civilian government. But how good is the cooperation? And what is the chance that we will see Omar al-Bashir before the judges here?
It's a great question, and I'm not obfuscating. I'll say that in advance in my own defense. But I think Abd-Al-Rahman Ali Kushaib surrendered to the court in 2020. Probably in 2019, nobody thought that was possible at all. Definitely not in 2018. I think all we can do is to try to investigate, put the proper resources in, and I've put more resources since my term started as prosecutor into the Sudan situation. We've moved forward with an MOU. We've trying to form an office there. I've appointed a special advisor on Darfur, and we're trying to engage in more imaginative ways with other stakeholders to deepen the evidentiary pool that we can draw from to build solid cases. In the end, cooperation is vital, and it's of course challenging. I think definitely there's been an improvement from a decade ago in terms of then even in more recent times, the office was not even allowed to enter the territory or set foot in Sudan. We can enter Sudan. Members of my office are given visas. We are conducting interviews in Sudan. In fact, teams have just come back quite recently. So all that's welcome, and I'm grateful for that improvement. But cooperation can always deepen. It can always become more meaningful. And really, particularly when it comes to access to archives and others, I'm looking at ways of trying to build that trust and build confidence and to try to really be quite transparent. I really would like to close the situation, but I can't do that unless we can move forward. And that requires, or at least it would be made much easier, with ever closer, ever deeper and ever more effective partnership and cooperation with the government of Sudan, but also other stakeholders. And I think that's the other part, going back to my first point or second point, of reaching out with those that have information so that we can finally close this chapter and Sudan can move forward. But it won't move forward without effective investigations and a meaningful justice. And that can take many forms. There can be a dialogue there, but it has to be effective investigations and meaningful accountability. And I think that's what the Rome Statute demands, and it's, of course, what, at least in this office, we pray for.
Kerstin Schweighöfer, German Public Radio, Deutschlandfunk. I just wanted to know, Mr. Khan, could you describe for our listeners a little bit more how you collected the evidence? You were supported by UN organizations, by NGOs. How did it happen? How did you get the information? And a broader question, perhaps, for Jan just said it is an historical day today. Could you just stress once more the importance of this trial and the meaning of it in a more broader sense also for people in Ukraine and Russia? What does it mean for the world and for those in Russia and Ukraine that justice is brought to Darfur right now?
The first part of the question, if I may, well, let me, if you don't mind. The next question, Francesca, if you can, it should go back to Sudan, so we don't forget our colleagues, because they have I want to hear their voices, and they have a right to put questions. So after this, please, let's make sure we go back. The first part of the question, if I may, in terms of how do we collect and all the rest of it, I'll leave that to Mr. Nichols to deal with. Look, we've seen numerous examples from the former Yugoslavia, when, again, we've seen it from Cambodia in relation to Pol Pot and Khmer Rouge, and we've seen it here, in this case, that the march for justice, the march for accountability is not a well-tarmacked road. It's not a Hague bicycle path. It is strewn with boulders, and one can stumble and slip, and it can be perilous for many who wish to traverse it. But I think at the end, the real stroke of optimism is that despite obstacles, the badly laid road, and obstacles that have been placed, and against quite some odds, and despite some effort in some quarters, this day has come. And I believe that in some refugee camps today, I haven't seen the pictures as yet, I don't know if Julian or Dahiru has seen, that there's large monitors, and some of our brothers and sisters that are in Darfur, people in those camps that maybe haven't left them since the events of 2003, 2004. I can imagine them glued to their TV, and it matters to them in terms of vindicating that their life matters when you've been told, as you've seen on video clips today, that because of ethnicity, whether you're Fur or Maslit or because of your color, because of your tribe, you're viewed as not worthy of anything, to be trodden on or stamped upon or disregarded. I think it's very important that they can see that the world is still interested in them, that we do care, that we have not forgotten, that we don't have the attention span of a gnat, that despite all the different issues that are taking place in the world, you've all got the time and the stamina and the patience to give to give time about something that started in 2003, 2004, and has gone on. But the book has not been finished. The chapter hasn't been finally written, and it's very important. I think in this in justice, there's always more things in front of us, and it's very easy, whether you're a political leader, whether you're a journalist, whether we're lawyers, investigators, to keep rushing to the next story, to the next issue, without trying to make sure that we close and dedicate resources for also equally egregious violations of the past. And I think for that reason, it's an important message. And we know from Nuremberg, one of the principles of Nuremberg is that there's no statutory limitation for war crimes, for crimes against humanity. And I think the collective will, or the collective realization that goes beyond this building and has to seep out and spill over and widen to engage all communities and all stakeholders, civil society, governments, leaders, that justice is an important part, not of soft law and normative human rights, but for something that is an anchor for stability and security. I think that realization, this is the penny hopefully will finally drop, that if we're not going to be condemned to keep revisiting the errors of the past and the lessons of the past and then say never again, and what lessons can we draw, we have to start changing our approach. And I think an important part of that, with other measures, means that the sanctity of human life, the rights of the individual, not to be persecuted or killed or raped, it has to be protected and has to be struggled for. And this office, what it stands for, and this court, what it stands for, needs your support. It needs much wider support as well. And only then can we, take the words of the statute and the wonderful, beautiful prose of the preamble and translate it to something that is beyond finery, but something concrete that makes a jot of difference to those that are still in parlous conditions. Julian, perhaps the first part you can answer.
Yes, just very quickly, the way we've collected evidence and put this case together has been a sort of traditional way, which has been quite difficult because the 31 counts, the confirmed charges, are from August 2003 through April 2004, excuse me. The first warrant was issued in 2007, so we're going back a long way to an area that was very impoverished in the beginning of the conflict. Journalists were not allowed there. There was not good internet coverage and cell phone use to preserve some of the crime scenes, and acts the way is much more prevalent now and useful in some cases. This case has not been built on NGO reports or things like that. It's been built on interviewing witnesses, finding leads, following up, and doing that from outside Sudan because we were not allowed to go there. There was actual obstruction for so long before very recently. Our first mission where we were able to work in Sudan was not till March 2021. So really before that, we've put the case together by finding leads, interviewing witnesses. I won't go into all the details, but it's been a sort of traditional investigation.
Thank you very much all. And we'll take the last question from the Sudan, Median Sudan. And before that, Mr. Prosecutor, if you allow me, the first two questions were from Darfur 24. Sorry, I did not tell you earlier. And the last question is from Sudan Radio Services in Nairobi, and I will read. Does the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, Karim Khan, believe that the voluntary appearance of the accused, Ali Abdul-Rahman, nicknamed Kushaib, before the ICC is a victory for the victims in Darfur and the Sudanese refugees in refugees camps in the neighboring countries?
I think it's the least, the very least. I was saying I think it's the very least the victims deserve. I won't describe it as a victory. It's progress, it's important, it's momentous. It's the first trial that has started from the first referral by the Security Council of the United Nations under Chapter 7. The situation in Darfur, by dint of that, has been put in the same envelope as Yugoslavia and Rwanda, because of course those tribunals were established. But at the end of the day, this is not a case built upon special effects. The victims that you heard me summarize, the counts that the pretrial chamber unanimously confirmed, all 31 counts, and the evidence are the lived experiences of men and women and children. And I don't think it's too much to ask. I think it's the very least of us, of the international community, that when these tears in the fabric of people's lives take place, there is a reckoning, not out of vengeance, but protected by the law, based upon international standards, based upon objective, non-partisan investigations without any hidden agendas or political interference, and evidence that is solid and reliable and cogent and tested can be put before the judges, and then the defense can have a chance to challenge it, and then judges independently can be trusted to evaluate it and assess it and weigh it and decide whether or not the stringent standard of proof beyond reasonable doubt has been met. So I think it's the very least victims deserve, and I think it's been a long time coming, and it should have been sooner. But it's better late than never, and whilst the old adage is justice delayed is justice denied, this case can be an example that that's not always the case, that with persistence, with the strength of victims and survivors, with dedicated staff that we have in the office, with good partnerships elsewhere, despite the odds, justice can prevail, and therefore the worth of every individual can be vindicated, and attention can be drawn, and we can pause to look at what happened, and the heroes that are not in this room, that are in different places around the world, that have endured more than any living soul should have to endure. And that's the lesson really I would draw from today. That, you know, if we build this solidarity and if we work collegiately, as this is not the responsibility of a far-flung office, but it is a collective responsibility, we can actually overcome and make a difference. But if it's somebody else's problem, we're going to be doomed to fail. So I think it is a note of optimism, but it's a challenge to us, and we need to do more of it, and we need to have the stamina to go deeper. This can't be the end of the story, it's the beginning of accountability.
You've opened an investigation in Ukraine. Can you give me your assessment about what's happened in Bucha? Do the mass killings there constitute a war crime or a crime against humanity? And has your office managed to do any investigative work in Bucha or around that area yet?
Yeah. You know, Steve, I think Francisca said at the outset that the poor people of Darfur have been neglected and forgotten for far too long. Of course, I've already given statements. I've been to Ukraine and all the rest of it, but it's really disrespectful, in my view, for me not to give the people of Darfur at least half an hour, focus on their right to justice and their perseverance and this moment. And I think, you know, it wouldn't be respectful to start discussing other situations. There'll be time enough for that, and also I'll refer you to what's already the public domain regarding the team's activities, deployments, and my own presence in other locations of the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Prosecutor. Thank you all.
Thanks
Have
all
a
for your
nice
time.
evening.
Thank you so much.